Good evening. You are welcome to our virtual teaching. Yes, today we are looking at lesson 54, and basically we are treating a new topic, and we have Islam in West Africa. We are going to look at how the Islamic religion got spread into West Africa, because we have seen that most of the civilizations that we look at, they were all engaged in the indigenous traditional practices, and therefore we want to look at how the Islamic faith got introduced into West Africa. And don't forget, we are only focusing on West Africa. Now basically we are looking at today we look at the origin of Islam, that is the origin where it came from in West Africa, and then we look at the factors responsible for the spread of Islam in West Africa. So what were some of the factors that enabled the Islamic religion to spread to other to West Africa? So let's take a look at our lesson objectives. So by the end of the lesson, you should be able to identify the origin of Islam to West Africa, how it came from, or where it came from to West Africa. Then you should be able to discuss the factors responsible for the spread of the Islamic faith in West Africa. So this is going to be our lesson objective. So let this back you, or let this guide you as we move on in our discussion. Now let's take a look at the introduction of Islam to West Africa, how Islamic faith got introduced into West Africa. The introduction of Islam into West Africa could be traced to the time of the Arab conquest and occupation of the whole of North Africa from Egypt to Morocco between 369 AD and 709 AD. So we are aware that the North Africans were conquered by the Arabs, and as you can see in the map over there, that is the North Africans being conquered in the Arabs area. We shall look at the map as we move on later. Now, what then means Islam? Islam means submission to God. So the word Islam means when you are submitting to Allah or God, as doing the will of God. And North Africa was occupied by the Arabs, and they succeeded in converting most of the North African countries, into the Islamic language. It is worth pointing out that from North Africa, Islam gradually spread into the Western African Sudan, or the West African Sudan, and the Western Sudanese then adopted the Islamic religion and culture. Then adopted the Islamic religion and culture. So let's take a look at the map and see. So I'm going to zoom the map and see if we can see some of the writing on it. Okay, so now look at the map over there. So you realize that this is Arabia, and we are saying that the North Africans was conquered by Saudi Arabia over here. So we have here the Arabanization of the Nilotic Sudan. So that is the North Africans. From here they conquered North Africa, and then Muslim merchants crossed the Sahara Desert. So you realize that in the trans-Saharan trade, the Muslim merchants moved from the North Africa and they brought it to West Africa. And here Islam adopted by Sub-Saharan empire. So the Western Sudanese empires, began to adapt the Islamic faith. So if you are asked which people introduced Islam to the West Africans, you realize that Islam was, first of all, it was the North Africans who brought Islam. But who were they? They were the traders. The Muslim merchants or traders from North Africa were the ones who brought Islam to West Africa, specifically the Western Sudanese empires. And then the Western Sudanese empire kings adopted the faith. So let's then look at some of the reasons, of course, that led to the spread. How did the Islamic religion spread in Western Sudan? Who brought it, and how did it spread? Firstly, now trade was the major responsible or factor that accounted for the spread of Islam into West African Sudan. So one of the reasons responsible for the spread of Islam in West Africa was as a result of what? Trade. And we are all aware of the trade already, as we discussed in our earlier discussion. So the trans-Saharan trade brought a number of Berber Muslims and Arab merchants of North Africa to Western Sudan because of the attraction of gold. In the course of carrying out their trading activities, these Muslim merchants settled in strategic centers from where they made good efforts to preach to the indigenes by leading exemplary life of a good Muslim. And through this, the Muslims were able to convert Western Sudanese to Islam. The Berbers were the first to be converted to Islam in the Sahara, and it was from the Sahara that Islam spread into Western Sudan in later parts of the 10th century. So you could be asked which group of people in West Africa were first converted to the Islamic faith. It was the Berbers. Okay, and then in subsequent times, when the Berbers were converted as a result of trade between the Berbers, the Arabs, and the Western Sudanese, Islam got into West Africa. Good. Let's take a look at the second important factor was responsible for the diffusion of Islam into West Africa was the Almoravid conquest of Western Sudan. The Almoravid conquest of Western Sudan also was a factor that led to the spread of Islam into West Africa. Now, the Almoravid, led by Abdallah ibn Yassin, were a fanatical sect of Muslims who launched a militant reforming movement. They call them the jihadists, with the sole purpose of conquering and converting the pagan people to West African Sudan. The pagan people of West African Sudan to Islam. The Almoravids, believed that Islam had to be practiced in its purest form. The Almoravids, jihads, for example, were responsible for the conversion of rulers of Ghana to Islam. They waged jihad as holy war against the Western Sudanese states and subsequently conquered and converted them to Islam. So this group of people called the Almoravid people, okay, and they were led by a certain man called Abdallah ibn Yassin. And these were fanatic sect of Muslims. When you say somebody is fanatic, they are so crazy about their religion. Go and look for the meaning of course, a fanatic person, something. They are just crazy. They are this radical set of or group of Muslims, and their aim is to launch. They launch a military or a militant, of course, reforming movement, and they were the jihadists. And jihadists here means holy war. Their aim was to conquer the pagans to them of West African Sudan to Islam. Okay, and they believe that Islam has been practiced in its purest form. And the Almoravids, for example, were responsible. They attacked the Western Sudanese kings and empires, and then they converted them to become, of course, Muslims. And they waged several wars of conquest to them. So the Almoravids, their invasion of the Western Sudan also, led to a further spread of Islam, even though trade had brought it. They wanted everybody to be Muslims, and so they waged that jihadist war by the Hammurabi's. I hope you are clear with that of the Hammurabi's. Let's take a look at yet another factor responsible for the spread of Islam in West Africa: the adoption of Islam by the rulers of the Western Sudan. Islam also spread through the rulers of the Western Sudan. Most of the rulers of Western Sudan adopted Islam around this period, and as a result, the kings of Mali and Songhai and Kanem finally adopted the Islamic faith by the 11th century. And we realize that by the adoption of the Islamic faith by these kings meant that the religion was going to be a state religion, and therefore everyone or every subject in the state was supposed to belong to the Islamic faith, and therefore that also enabled Islam to spread quickly, especially in Mali and then in Songhai and also Kanem, because everyone would be engaged there. The next one was that another factor for the spread of Islam in West Africa was the intermarriages between the Muslim merchants and the Negro women of West African Sudan. And the Muslim, of course, merchants who had come from North Africa came to settle in the Western Sudan area, and they married the Negro women and gave birth to children. And through this, the women and their children got converted to the Islamic faith. Another reason that led to the spread of Islam again, as we have said, was that the Muslim merchants who came from North Africa, it came to settle and intermarried with the black women or the Negro women who were in Western Sudan, and they gave birth for them, and as a result, it further led to the spread of the Islamic faith. The next one was that the Muslim missionaries also contributed for the coming of Islam into West Africa, and these missionaries established Islamic centers of education in the Western Sudan, and products of these Islamic centers of education then spread and promoted the Islamic faith. They were employed by the kings of the Western Sudan as scribes, clerics, advisors, and interpreters, and they practiced their religion alongside their official duties. And this influenced some people of the Western Sudan to also get converted to the Islamic faith. So the Muslim missionaries also again established a lot of Islamic centers of education where people could go and learn the Quran, and more so these educated Muslims again, as we have said, were employed by the kings of the Western Sudan, and some of them worked as scribes, some of them worked as clerics, advisors, and interpreters. And people seeing these fine gentlemen, educated, doing their work and at the same time practicing the Islamic religion, also influence people to engage in the trade. Let's take a look at the last factor responsible for the spread of Islam in West Africa. So the activities of Muslim clerics, popularly known as the marabouts, and scholars or malams also play a significant role in the spread of Islam in West Africa. So the malams, as we normally call them, also played a role. So what was the role that they played? Let's take a look at their role. In their struggle and effort to diffuse Islam, these clerics or scholars, the malams were mainly the imam scholars, those who were teaching at the Islamic centers, established their own centers, which subsequently attracted students from all parts of the Western Sudan, and who, upon the completion of their studies and training, went back to their own countries of birth to remain converts. Some of them went on lecture missionary tours to convert people to Islam, and while others became advisors to the Western Sudanese kings on how to become good rulers. Some of the clerics who devoted much of their time to writing books and instructions on all aspects of Islam for the conversion and civilization of people, or for the purification and strengthening of Islam. And Islamic scholars such as Abid al-Lahibin Yassin and Al-Hajj Salim Suwar and Al-Makhili were outstanding and instrumental in the spread of Islam. For instance, Ibn Yasin established a Zawiya, or a college of trained people for missionary activity. So basically, these Muslim scholars or Malams' role was that some of them established Islamic training centers and were training people, right? Others also took to the writing of books so that they could explain certain aspects of the Islamic culture or civilization to the people. And some of these outstanding scholars are what we have their names there. And also, some of these, after some of the product of these schools, Muslim schools established by the Malams, also went out there to preach the Islamic faith. So basically, these were some of the reasons that led to the spread of Islam in West Africa. So as we do every day, I have a question there for you. Try your hands on, and we shall meet again some other time. Have a nice day. Bye.